What happens when three accountants walk into a bar?
Understand what's on your balance sheet. What's on your balance sheet?
I was about to be like, what's a balance sheet?
So the balance sheet is going to tell you what your assets are, what your liabilities are, and what is your net worth.
They always say you have to take the money, get the money, apply for the money, etc. when you don't need it. So cash flow is a huge thing.
And so it's not just about having in accounting software a professional. You have to have the team.
Well, I hope you're ready for this because this is what it looks like when you have three accountants sitting on, well, you're on a couch. I'm on a chair.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello. We're excited to be here.
You know what? Like what happens when three accountants walk into a bar? I'm just joking.
We drink.
We drink heavily.
Yes.
Let's talk about numbers. Do you want to talk about numbers? Because I like to talk about numbers.
Sure. What would you like
Nobody ever wants to talk about numbers with me, but I'm so excited about talking about numbers with you too. I would venture to say probably, I think we said this earlier, but I'm going to go a little bit higher, like 95% of business owners know nothing about finance. Wouldn't you say? Would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Especially, when someone's like, I saw this on TikTok or I saw this on Instagram. And you're like, oh no, here we go,
Right. Oh yeah.
Where are you getting your tax advice from?
I Googled how to start a business on TikTok. Did you Google on TikTok? I'm probably not a thing.
I'm sure it's there.
What do you think is like the one thing as you're both CPAs? So what do you think is the one thing as a CPA that is the most underutilized like tax strategy? Why don't you tell me?
I would say honestly, not necessarily like a specific law or a specific rule, but having a tax person. Like having the person that you can send an email to, having someone you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got a quick question and get help. Because if you are Googling or are watching TikToks, odds are like you have a problem and that's not the place to go to get an answer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I would 100% agree with that, as well as have an accounting software to help you.
My gosh.
Can we
just hold on a second? All right. So I told them when I was an accountant and before I launched my first business 17 years ago, and I used to do taxes on the side, like just quick money. You know what I mean? I'm nothing that you all are doing here, but like quick money. And do you know how many people, like, is this still a thing? Do they still bring you like shoe boxes?
With receipts? Absolutely.
Shoe boxes with receipts?
Now they just give you their bank statement information
right.
and say, hey, here you go. And you're like, okay.
Okay, so you heard it first. Do not deliver a shoebox of receipts or a bank statement to your CPA because that's a lot of mess. Get yourself an accounting software. I think that's so important. Like that's the number one thing, right? So if you have started a business, you're thinking about starting a business, or you have a business that's 10 years old or 20 years old, it's never too late.
Absolutely.
Right? Get an accounting software and get a professional.
Please.
That's
great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love that. What about and so when we're talking about like money in general, what do you think most people are bootstrapping probably? Yeah. Bootstrapping in their business.
Say so.
Bootstrapping in their business. And what if there was someone who has investors? Like, is that like a delicate, like, how do you navigate that as like a CPA or for like a financial accounting firm? If I have an investor, are you running like the strategy of like who gets, because at some point these investors are probably like, hey, I need to get paid.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things is you see people come in and they say, okay, we're the owners, or this is our strategy, or this person's doing this. And you say, okay, well, where are the documents that support this? Mm-hmm. And then you have to tell them, well, now you need an attorney that has to actually draft this. And I can help you with the tax portion of the language in there, but I can't help you put this agreement together. And have you really thought this through? And have you really thought, what happens when you guys are really mad at each other and you're done? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't think from all the way from beginning to end. Absolutely. And the unfortunate thing is, especially when friends and really good relationships are involved, there's a lot of emotion that runs high and it can end very sour for a lot of people. And if they haven't thought through that, it becomes very problematic and drawn out. And so it's not just about having in accounting software a professional. You have to have the team to support the business.
I love this. Yeah.
And an attorney is going to be one of those players in there too. And, we're going to refer you. That's a question for your attorney. You need to get their opinion on it.
So like as an accountant, do you see, or as a CPA, this is a great question for you. Do you know there's like different stages in lives of business, right? Mm-hmm. So you're like in the startup, like I want to start a business, right? And then that's like, you might just need the accounting software and then you're going to take that to the CPA at the end. And then you go through the like, okay, this is a real business. I want to grow the business. Now I want to scale the business. Now I want to sell the business, right? Talk a little bit about, or maybe if you even have a story from like a client who we will not mention, maybe they're like at this point where they're like, they wanted to sell their business, but like, what does it take if we could just erase all the mistakes that every business owner has made along the way, right? And it was like a perfect world. What does that look like from like, I want to start? Sometimes you want to start and you don't know if it's like a real business or if you could really sell it or scale it. And you're like, oh crap, I'm onto something good, right?
Yeah.
But like in a perfect world, what are all the steps that maybe an entrepreneur could take to help like offset some of the pain and selling or
Yeah, I think you do definitely still need to make sure you have a business plan in place, right? You want to make sure that you have good financials. I think that's one of the things when people start their business and then they want to sell and then the investor is asking for financial statements, they don't have a clean and good financial, right?
Okay, wait, stop right there. What is clean and good financial? Because again, 98% of people who start businesses have no financial background. What does that mean?
Understand what's on your balance sheet. What's on your balance sheet.
I was about to be like, what's a balance sheet?
So the balance sheet is going to tell you what your assets are, what your liabilities are, and what is your net worth. So you definitely want to understand what's on your balance sheet and then understand how your revenue has grown or developed from year to year. And then what is the plan for selling? I think still you need an advisor to help you with that selling strategy as well, right?
Sure.
Because there are certain things that you want to know and you want to understand before you get to that point and start talking and start negotiating. Make sure you get the right price for your business. So you want to make sure you have someone that can help you value what your business truly is and then go from there.
You're definitely, as a CPA and as like the financial, like the CFO, you're definitely part of like an integral part of a team, right? What are some of the other teammates maybe you would suggest or that you also need in growing a sustainable business?
Yeah, it really depends because like you said, there's this whole life cycle of what a business looks like. And so you have that day one that, oh my gosh, I'm excited. I have my own business today. So first and foremost, I think the attorney has to be involved first. You also have to have just honestly some informal mentors, people that you can bounce ideas off of and just say, hey, is this a good idea or is that not? And along with that, you have to have a network. You have to know who are you trying to sell your business to or your product or your service or whatever you have. So it's, that's still your network is maybe not directly advising you on your business, but they're absolutely the integral part of, I can't just go out tomorrow and say, have a roller skating rink. I mean, maybe my daughter's friends would really enjoy that or something, right? But like, I have no idea what the market is for that. And so you need to have the network. Absolutely, you need to have an accountant and or CPA. There's lots of different levels of services that are going to be in our field from different types of people. And you need to have those in place to be able to support you and guide you.
Yeah, I love that.
I would also add, especially depending on the type of business that you have, you need an insurance person.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
You need to be able to protect yourself. So an insurance person, and then as well, maybe an investment advisor, right? For, those businesses that are growing like very large and, big. You want to have an investment advisor there as well, which is really different from a CPA. Everything is we're not equally, yoked. Everybody has their own specialty. So
okay, so I'm going to play business owner client. Ready?
Okay.
But it's so expensive. I can't afford it.
You can't afford not to have it.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay, but I can only pick one. Who do I pick? Right? Like these, I feel like this is like some of the things that they say, right? Like, so yeah, I get it. We need all of that, but like, How?
If you don't do it right now, it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run. So you're better off spending the money. You need to figure it out. But there are definitely some non-negotiables when you're getting started. And so you have to make it work. You have to figure out the solution.
I think that's so important. I want to also I want to touch on this as well. So just moving on to like pricing and profit margins, right? This is a big important part. Like we were laughing earlier saying like, oh, I have a business, but I don't know how much I make. I don't know if you're not making any money at the end of the day. You don't know your numbers. You don't know like your projections. And a lot of times, I think as entrepreneurs, it's funny because like I sit as an accountant by trade, very like in my very early stages, but I also sit as like the one who's built the businesses too, right? And has the passions and all the things. And I think what's made me so successful is that like I understand the margins, and it's when you're looking at the numbers and you know the numbers, the decisions become very clear and easy. You don't have to worry about these financial, these emotional decisions, right? Of like, oh, and sometimes a firing decision is just that she's not producing and the numbers don't make sense. And I'm sorry, but business is business, right? But, I really want to like add a widget to the product line. And they're like, but the numbers, baby, we call them like treasure chest ideas and dreams, because we're like, we can't make it work. Right. So I think we know that knowing your numbers is so important. We say that, we've said that so much, right? You got to know your numbers. I got to know my numbers. I got that. But like, can we talk about percentages? Like maybe gross profit margins? What is a good number? Right? Like, so if I have a service-based business, let's take it down and like break it down to like accounting 101. Okay. Sales come in. Yep. Then you have your output, right? You have let's talk about that. And then when you arrive at your gross profit, what should that, or your cost of goods sold, what should that be? Just for anyone who could quickly do math to say like, am I making money?
I don't know. I think it's really hard to answer with just a blanket number. It really varies by industry and where your company is in the stage of growth. There may be times where, depending on what your plan is, you have set a strategy to reduce it for a certain period of time to get where you're trying to go. So again, I just don't think that that's necessarily something that a blanket number, because every industry, it could have significant fluctuations. But I do think that even if they don't, they're not looking at their financial statements on a daily basis or a weekly basis. We live in a time where a lot of people are creating businesses who don't have a finance or a business or that type of background, and they're very successful at what they do.
Yeah.
And so it's not that they have to live and breathe the numbers, but they have to have somebody that does.
That's right.
And can explain them, those numbers to them in a way that it makes sense. And they can make an informed decision, like you're saying, and they can come to those answers by themselves rather than everybody having to tell them you can't afford this or the service model isn't there to be able to do this right now. They have to have that team player to be able to explain to them, this is what's going on, this is where you want to get, and this is where you're at right now.
I love that because it's all about sacrifice,
Yeah, agree. And I would add to that, understand your fixed cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's that cost you're going to spend.
What's a fixed cost?
That's the cost you're going to spend regardless of how many units you sell, how many services you sell. If you have absolutely no sales, you're still going to have that cost.
So like payroll?
Rent, payroll, exactly. Utilities. Those things you're going to pay regardless. So I think if you at least have a good understanding of what your fixed cost, that gives you the base to know, okay, I have to at least make this amount and then start talking about other things. So.
I love that. But okay, how much should I pay myself? Don't you think I should get paid? Should I take all the money out? Should I like what? I'm sure that's like a question in a strategy you're looking at with your clients all the time, right? You have I feel like you probably have some entrepreneurs who just reinvest everything. And you're like, honey, you got to pay yourself a little bit. Oh, that's fine. Or I do. I run it on my credit cards, right? Yes. So it's, I went there, yep.
Yes.
Oh man. So I think it's one of those things where it depends on what their goals are, right? And so it comes into, there's so many questions that you ask them. how much do you want to pay in taxes? Because as a business owner, you have a lot more control over what comes out on taxes at the end of the year when you file based on how much money you've made, and you have direct control over that spending. But I also try and tell people that the end goal is not to pay no taxes. There are a lot of other benefits that come with being an upstanding taxpayer in our economy, in our world, that are way beyond just
like
the cash
what?
in your pocket.
Like
Social
what?
Security, and access to being able to save for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes along with, yes, like, how do we structure how we pay you? Do we need to look at the market and see what somebody else performing your role would be making? And then do we need to tailor that based on where your business is in its life cycle? There's just a lot of pieces of that. How much can you live on? How much can you afford to live on and be able to reinvest into the company? Do you want to hire another employee? How much can you take away from what's in your pocket to be able to do that? You want to develop a new product, put some money into R&D, research and development. How much can you afford to live on comfortably and be able to grow the business, and you'll still be satisfied that you're happy with how much you're making? Because there are times where those two things will absolutely have to conflict, and you're going to want to reach another milestone, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices there to do that.
Oh, 100%. I love this because when I talk to our banker friends, they always say you have to take the money, get the money, apply for the money, et cetera, when you don't need it. So cash flow is a huge thing. So if you're looking at scaling and growing your business, you may need to keep some of that money on the account to get money. You have to have money to get money oftentimes, right? So are you navigating your clients? You're navigating those types of conversations and needs and things like that.
Absolutely.
Time, right?
It's very good to have a reserve in the bank, right? You want that reserve for, times where maybe business is slow, or, an emergency comes up or things like that. So having a reserve is very important. And just circling back on how much do you pay yourself? Like you said, you do need to pay yourself. I agree. But I do think it's very important that you reinvest in the business, right? So that you can continue that business growth. So I think that's important. And then you also hit on credit cards.
I did. You were like, credit cards, the worst thing ever.
It is, because, it's so easy to swipe.
Oh my gosh, because it starts out where you're like, I'm going to get this credit card and then I'm going to pay the balance in
Every
full
month.
every month.
Absolutely.
You're so good.
Yes,
until you're
yes.
not.
Exactly. And I think that's what you need to be careful of, right? Make sure that you can pay that credit card off at the end of the month, because that's not cash flow. Okay.
It's not a credit line, guys.
Exactly. So you really want to beware.
Or it's a very expensive credit line.
It is very expensive. And so think about that as your cost. As a business, you don't want to have to pay all that interest cost and all of that as well. So just be very careful as you continue to swipe your credit card and know that you can pay it at the end of the period, because that is not your salary. It's not.
That is so funny. I feel like I'm saying all the things. Like, these are all the things that I remember hearing, right? And you're like, oh yeah, this is still happening. I want to, before we close out, there is, I feel like there's some nuggets that you probably have that you can share. I want to talk about tax strategy. Whether it is watching a TikTok or an Instagram, you have all of these tax professionals who talk about, the 179 deduction, the meals allowance, the entertainment allowance. What do you think? And from each of you, what do you think, with this being small business focused, right? What's one of the deductions or the strategies that maybe we don't know about? Is there one thing that you're like, you make sure you go to your CPA and you ask them about this? Underutilized.
I think that a lot of small business owners don't know and understand and implement retirement strategies that are available for them, and also evaluating health insurance options that, and whether they're, a solopreneur or they have a small team of employees, it depends on where they're located, right? These rules can vary tremendously by state, but there are a lot of things that, and maybe at the initial phase of being, a 1 or 2 year, startup, it doesn't make sense for them to be in that position yet. But then they need to start looking at the big picture. And the big picture, like we've been talking about, there are so many pieces that you can really quickly forget about some of the things that are very important to do. And so I would say that would be number one for me. And then I guess kind of the side note, which maybe not one that they don't necessarily like know about, but the one that is maybe ill-advised is the S Corp. Everybody, I get so many calls of, should I be an S Corp? Should I be an S Corp?
I'm glad you're answering. I was going to ask you this question. This is good.
We run a full analysis and we show someone exactly what the difference is going from being not an S Corp and just calling yourself an S Corp. Legal entity terms are way more complicated than that. So you need to know and understand what your entity actually is. Because here in Texas, you're typically not just an S Corp. You're an LLC that has elected to be taxed as an S Corp.
Right.
So it's a lot more complicated. And a lot of people just think, oh, that's going to save me a bunch of money. And they need someone to show them that it might not really save you that much until you get to a certain threshold. And I'm not going to share what my kind of general threshold is, but they need to talk to someone and have them map those numbers because it may, their situation is not going to compare apples to apples next to them. So I think that'd be my last one. I'm going to throw a third one in there is don't talk taxes and strategies with your friends because, we can all sit here, we can all say, oh, I'm a business owner or this or that. And, one teeny tiny fact can make it be apples and bananas.
Yes.
And it's difficult for the people sitting there to see that. So those are going to be three big ones for me.
I love this because am I the only one that saw on Instagram? I bought a G-Wagon for my business. Did you know you could buy a G-Wagon and write it off completely because of the payload weight and the $179 deduction? And then all of a sudden everybody's like, I want to buy a G-Wagon for my business. Yeah. And you're like, hold on. Right. So you run to your CPA and you ask the question and they're like, yeah, don't do that. Don't.
You stole my thunder because that's exactly what I was going to say. I am not a tax accountant, so I will clear that up in right now. But the deductions, I mean, there's so many deductions that, people think that they can take. And so you just really want to have a reputable tax advisor who knows how to take those deductions. Are they the right type of deductions that you are allowed to take and go from there? Like everything is not deductible in your house. I understand you work from home.
And I understand that you want it to be.
But everything is not.
It's not.
Exactly.
Okay, I got a bonus question then. So because this leads me into one more question. There are kind of coming up on the scene, which I actually am really excited to see this from the financial industry. There are real tax strategists out here now. There are people very, very, very different type of, there's the bookkeeper, the CPA, the tax accountant, the tax strategist, there's so many different types of financial professionals. What's the hire that if you don't know anything about finances, like we talked about, I'm a designer, I like to do design and wow, I have a business and it's making money. What's that first hire? Or just run through a couple of different hires that would say the bookkeeper is important because right? The CPA is important because of this. Then you need to have the tax strategist because of this. Talk just quickly. Let's just bounce it off just because there's so many different types of hires. And if I'm new to business or I'm finally making money and I'm I don't even know what I need.
Right. I think, a bookkeeper definitely for me would be one of the first people that you would want to invest in or hire.
And the bookkeeper does what?
Basically, they're going to take your finances, your transactions, and make sure that they're being coded to a accounting software so that you know how much you're spending, where the money is going to, and all of that good stuff. So you need someone, and please make sure you get a separate bank account.
Oh, yes.
I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Co-mingling
yes,
those
please
funds.
don't co-mingle your funds. So I think having someone to actually take those finances, those transactions, and put them in a systematic program that can tell you what you're spending, how you're spending, that's really important because then when you go to your tax advisor or, other CPAs, at least you have a good start of the funds that you've already spent for that business.
I love that. And then I think you said you didn't want to give a number, but could you please give a number of when should I start looking at, a tax strategist? Like when do I need to really start focusing on strategy and saving and retirement and, like different ways that I can offset funds and save some of that?
I would say probably once you have enough money that you're comfortably paying your living expenses, that like you are paying yourself enough where you're like, there is extra money. At that point, I would say probably at least, and a tax strategist may be on the more extreme side of it, right? Because, a CPA is going to be looking depending on. So my kind of secondary comment to what she's saying is you need to vet the people that you're using.
Yes.
There are so many of these. I don't know if you're scrolling on Facebook and Instagram, but it's like learn how to be a bookkeeper in 6 weeks.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's really ugly out there. And having someone who you think is doing your books, but is not doing them will cost you a whole lot more money. So you need to actually vet that person's technical expertise. So I would say that, the bookkeeper and the CPA, it needs to be closely timed, because if you're missing out on deductions, if you're missing out on conversations about deductions, you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
And again, you can get into problems that cost you a whole lot more money a lot faster than if you had those team players involved from the get-go to help you understand and navigate. And it's important that you really are using professionals that are qualified to give you the advice that they're giving. And so referrals are a great way to make sure that the people that are using those service providers are truly happy with the service they're receiving. This is a field where a lot of people are very vocal that they have a person, but they don't like them.
And if I can
Oh,
add to
yes.
that,
Oh, yes.
because, and I'm almost kind of backtrack myself, because you hit on something, even when you decide what type of entity you want to be, I think that tax strategy comes into play there, right?
Yes.
So it's almost like you need to talk to someone before you make
even
that
start.
decision
Yes.
of what type of entity you want to be, because then
Yes.
that plays into, tax planning, tax savings, and
Yes.
those.
And there's
types of
time
things as well.
limits on when you can file an S corp.
Exactly.
And you can't backdate that.
Nope.
And if you're stuck with Schedule C, I'm going to drop some language. If you're stuck with high Schedule C income and that's going down to your personal, and then you got to pay taxes on that.
Exactly.
And you could have been an S corp to begin with, and you could have taken, you know what I mean, and you could have offset some of that. There's definitely, you got to leave it to the professionals. You got to leave it to the professionals. But then here's where I want to end it too, because I think this is really important. Ignorance is not bliss in this situation, because at the end of the day, you can hire all the professionals. And I love that you said you have to vet these people, because the bottom line is your bottom line. So you could hire the bookkeeper, right? And the bookkeeper could code however she wants to code, and you could code however you want to code. But at the end of the day, if this audit comes through, it's on you. It's not on her.
That's right.
So I love that you said that. We got to vet them. Thanks, ladies.
Thank
Shop Talk by
you.
No. Financial.
This has been fun.